Welcome to Collecting Chaos and this special 100th Eternal Mylite project. It's a special one. I'm not going to show the kind of stuff I normally do. I'm going to show stuff that's already in my collection, not stuff that I'm getting ready to put in my collection that I've had for so many years. Some of these I haven't had that long. Some of them I've had for a long time. But I want to show them to you because each one is kind of special to me for a different reason. And we'll go over all of that. But first, let's get this out of the way. Now, I want to go ahead and do this now. Remember, I showed you some comics and said one of them is going to be my cover of the week. Do I really even need to show these two? I mean, do I? I mean, yeah, they're great covers. I really like them, but do I really need to bother showing them? I don't think so. I wasn't fooling anybody. Everybody knows what comic is going to be my cover of the week. Everybody knows it's Black Cat number 90. Or, excuse me, Spectacular Spider-Man number 90. This is one of the first appearances of the black spider suit, which later becomes Venom. Or was it this one? Or was it this one? It's not the same comic. It's the same comic, but it's not the same comic. Let me shed a little more light on the subject for you. Now, they're both in Mylar. I've pressed, I've cleaned. I had to clean this one, or was it this one? I think it was this one I had to clean. And I pressed them. They're gorgeous books now. I mean, they looked nice before, but now they really look nice. This one is the direct market. This one is the newsstand edition. So they do have some differences. Basically, they're the same. If you notice, the differences are all on the left-hand side. This has the different... the direct market shows the U.S. price, the UK price, the Canadian price, and the newsstand only shows the US price. Now, I think there is a newsstand Canadian version, but I've never seen it, so if you've got one, I'd be interested. So, yeah, that's my cover of the week. Spider-Man, number 90. Not for the reason most people would pick it. Let's move on to my top 10 comics of all time and why. These are my top 10 favorite comic books of all time and why they are my favorites. Now, there's other comics that I like better than some of these, but for one reason or the other, these make my top 10. And the first category is cover by. A comic that I bought solely for the cover. And that was Portasio's X-Men 290. Up until this time, when this came out, I wasn't buying X-Men. I could care less about X-Men. I saw this cover. I had to have it. I've not read it to this day. I probably never will, because I'm not a big X-Men fan. Yes, I did read the first 60 or 70 X-Men, whatever number it went to before they started doing reprints of the original series. But after that, I kind of lost interest. And even when Chris Claremont brought out the new X-Men, it wasn't something that appealed to me, so I didn't read them. Now, I have read some X-Men since then. I have read a lot of Chris Claremont's run. And it's really, really good, and I can understand why people like it. But when I saw this cover, I went, wow. And I took it up there, and the guy at the register said, "Is this a mistake?" "You don't buy X-Men." I went, "No, but I'm going to buy that one." He went, "Why?" I said, "Look at it. It's a gorgeous freaking cover. It's one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. I've got to own it." And that's why I bought it, and that's why it's in my top 10 as my number one comic that I bought purely for the cover. Next. Favorite Marvel character. Now, my favorite Marvel character is actually Daredevil, but I don't have a copy of Daredevil #1 anymore. I plan on getting one, but I don't have one right now. Currently, my favorite Marvel character, and the one that I buy whenever I see it, its first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man #194. And of course, it's the Black Cat. And many of you know that anytime I see a Black Cat cover up, I buy it. That's why I have 2 copies of #90. This is the newsstand, or the direct market. I do want to get a newsstand edition of this as well. One day. Not in a big hurry. So yeah, that's my favorite Marvel character. That's not really a hero. Kind of an anti-hero. Sometimes she's a hero, sometimes she's a villain. You don't know what she's going to be. She's pretty much Marvel's version of Catwoman. Next, my favorite storyline of all time. And it was a long one. But I'm only going to show you the first issue. Preacher. The Preacher story is incredible. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Sorry about the glare and the reflection of the camera. There's just nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to take these out of the Mylar. Yeah. My favorite storyline. The entire run. From 1 to whatever number it went up to, I forget now. But Garth Ennis just did a wonderful job on it. And like I said, my favorite storyline of all time. Next up, there was a character that came out in the 60s that I really liked. It was in Marvel, and he didn't really have a name. They just called him him. But in the 70s, they gave him a name. Now, I'm not going to go back and collect all the different copies of him that ever showed up. But I did want this one. Power of the Warlock. Marvel Premiere #1. This is where he gets his name. Beautiful Gil Kane, Dan Adkins cover. This one is a little faded. Color's a little off. But I love this comic. The story's great. And it takes us on a journey that introduces such characters as Thanos. Because without Warlock, there probably would not be a Thanos. You can argue with me if you want. I don't care. That's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. So yeah. I didn't buy it as a spec book. I bought it because I liked the character. Now, one of the unsung comics in the world of Marvel introduced a number of things, including the Cat People. And of course, I'm talking about the Cat #1. Now, the character that was the cat that wore this costume originally, I believe she dies in Marvel Premiere #42, which introduces Tigra. But I'm not going to swear to that. And I think Hellcat took the costume. If I remember right, I think Hellcat ended up taking the costume. But without this issue, and without the introduction of this character, which was written by a woman and illustrated by a woman, by the way, without this series, you wouldn't have the Cat People, you wouldn't have Tigra, you wouldn't have Hellcat. There's so many characters in the Marvel Universe right now that you would not have without this comic. So this comic is really important, and I just think it's kind of cool. And I think it was a 4-issue series, and I enjoyed it. I've got a couple of copies of this, and I'm probably going to keep them both. Now let's move to a spec book. This was the very first comic I ever bought, Speculation. Now this is not one of those copies that I got, because I bought like 40 or 50 copies. I think it was 50. Went to like every 7-Eleven, every drugstore, every place I could find, and bought every one I could lay my hands on. And of course I'm talking about Conan the Barbarian #1. And this is the one I bought so many copies of. This is not, I don't think this is one of those copies, but this is one I picked up recently over the last couple of years to replace that, because I'm thinking maybe I do want to collect Conan. Maybe I do want a full run of Conan again one day. In the meantime, I've got this one to start it out, and I've got a bunch of the others too. This one is, I consider this to be very good condition. It needs a clean, it needs a press. I will do that to it eventually. But for right now, it's just sitting in Mylar in my collection. Spec book #2. I bought this as a speculation book. I paid way too much money for it. I'm not going to disclose the amount that I paid, but I paid too much for it. It was a good speculation. It's worth a whole lot more than what I paid. But I've grown attached to it. I don't think I can sell it. First appearance of Supergirl. Action Comics 252. It's a really nice copy. I would say fine to fine plus, maybe. Yeah. One of my favorite characters from DC. Not my favorite, but one of my favorites. Now, I have a favorite Wonder Woman cover too, but I couldn't find it, so I'm not including it. I know I have it, I just couldn't find it. And the camera shut off. That's okay, I was nearly finished with that sentence anyway. Let's go to the next comic. The next comic is important to me for a whole different reason. It represents a buy that I did back when I was had my comic store. An older woman came in and she brought a small stack, maybe 10, 15 comics, and said, "Do you buy comics?" I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "Would you be interested in these?" And I took a look and I saw, I didn't see this one, this was down near the bottom, but I saw 10 cents on the price. So I kind of moved the first couple over and I went, "Yeah, I'd be interested." She said, "Do you think you could give me maybe $10 for them?" And I started going through the comics, one at a time. And there was stuff like Our Love and some of the DC romance titles and some other miscellaneous things. And then I got to this one. I looked at it and I thought, I can make money off of this. And I was thinking, but this is more than a $10 comic. And if I sell all these comics for $10 a piece, I'll get my money back if I give her a reasonable price. So I looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, I cannot give you $10 for these comics." And she went, "Well, I understand." I said, "But I am willing to make you a fair offer." And she said, "Okay." And the woman with her said, "I told you we should have sold them at the other place." She said, "Well, let's see what his offer is." I said, "Now this is my final offer. This is the only time I'm going to make it. It's a one-time thing. I cannot afford to pay a penny more for it." So they figure I'm going to rip them off. And I reach into my register, I pull out a $100 bill, and I hand it to her. I said, that's my offer if you're interested. I put it on the counter. I didn't hand it to her. I put it on the counter. Comics are here. $100 bill is there. I said, that's the most I can possibly pay for them. And she just looked at me and went, okay. Took the $100 and went on. I said, if you ever have anything else, please feel free to bring it in. I will always give you a fair offer for vintage things that I think I can sell. And this comic represents the memory of that. Now, this is like a $200 or $300 comic right now. So it was a good buy. At the time, it was like a $150 book. So it hasn't gone up a lot, but it has gone up. It's a robot cover. It's Batman. It's Robin. There's nothing, what's not to like about it? Well, maybe the piss yellow background. But all in all, the comic reminds me of that woman, of that time, and the time I took a disappointed woman because I wasn't willing to pay what she asked and paid 10 times that amount, which was a fair offer. I did get my money back on the comics. I still have some of the romance ones, I think. They're worth a decent amount of money, too. But yeah, this is the one that reminds me of that woman in that deal. So that's why that's one of my favorites. This next one I'm going to go ahead and take out of the Mylar, because I have a story to tell. And this is an older comic. It's from 1955, which was the year after I was born. And I knew the comic from this page. I'd never seen the cover, which is why I'm showing it to you this way. And I was looking at it in a store, and when I opened it up and I saw the page, I went, oh my God, I need this comic. And the guy went, no, you don't want that one. I said, no, I want it. I have to have it. I need this comic. He went, no. And I said, you don't understand. I have to have this comic. And he said that, I turned a little bit white when I looked at it. Now, it's got some stains and it's in pretty bad shape. But it doesn't, I don't care. This comic, it means everything. And here's the reason he didn't want to sell it to me. Right there. Because it's missing part of the story. And part of the art. I didn't care. None of that made any difference to me. The only thing that made a difference to me was back when I was about 5 or 6 years old, someone gave me a coverless comic. And this was that comic. And it wasn't until I saw it, and I'd seen the comic many times, so it wasn't until I saw that splash page that I knew I had to have this comic. Because this was the first comic that I ever read. First comic I ever owned. And it means the world to me. But wait, there's more. There's one more comic that means even more than this one. Now, I'll sell eventually, if the price is right, I'll even sell this comic. I'll sell every comic I own, except one. And that's this one. It's not particularly valuable. Well, I mean, it's probably worth $1,000. But it's not particularly rare. It's not particularly valuable as far as that goes. But the comic itself means more to me than any other comic in my collection. It was my birthday. My wife handed me $100 or $200, I forget. She said, here's some money. Buy yourself a comic book. And this is the comic I bought. So literally, my wife bought this comic book for me. It was the first and only comic book she ever bought me for my collection. And that's why this is my most valuable comic. It doesn't have a huge value monetarily, but the sentimental value is, it's priceless. And those are my top 10 favorite comics. And why? I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Eternal Mylite Project. Oh, take those out. That's my cover of the week. Everybody knew what it was going to be. I wasn't fooling anybody. The only way I could have fooled anybody is if I had pulled out this one and said that these two were in the running for cover of the week. Then it would have been a problem. But yeah, that's my story, or some of it. And some of these are worth a lot of money. Some of them are worth a little bit of money. Some of them are probably grails for people. That's okay. For me, they'll probably be the last 10 comics I sell. Except for this one. And I'll never sell that one. Ever. Make sure before you handle your comics, your cards, toys, games, whatever they happen to be, you wash your hands. It's good for your comics. It's good for your health. I'm going to skip all the rest of it and just say bye.